Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Impact Teams Radio. This is your host and guide, Tony Sherman, and today my guest is Mark Miller, the Vice President of Marketing for Emergenetics International. We'll get to Mark in a second, but first of all, I just want to thank everyone for reaching out, your comments on Facebook, and also got a few comments on the website itself, so thank you very much for that. I'm still moderating them, so I'll publish them soon, I promise. But the basic thrust of this is people are enjoying what we're doing for leadership. They're asking for more concrete examples. And I hope we're giving you that with a deep dive. Because remember, what we're trying to do here with Impact Teams Radio is to give you, the listener, the tools, techniques in terms of tactics and strategy that will build your leadership in corporate America in the 21st century. And part of that is virtual teams. And one of the reasons that I invited Mark on the show was Mark has written a really great article on LinkedIn. I urge you to check out his profile and check him out on how to build a better team in a virtual world. It is the 21st century, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to know how to work virtually. And he's just got some basic block and tackle, but good comments on there that I urge you all to read. So without further ado, Mark, thank you very much for being our guest on the show.
Thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Oh, my pleasure. So let me step away from the mic for a second or two, for a minute or two, Mark. I don't want to put you under pressure, and just ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Well, I am Mark Miller, Vice President of Marketing for Emergenetics International, and Emergenetics International is a human capital company. We provide and develop our proprietary assessments that look at thinking and behavior, and we then apply that into the corporate world, into an organizational context, leadership development, coaching, and team building. And really, our goal is to empower individuals to better understand themselves and utilize that understanding to be better performers, better relationship builders with others, and really take that into the context of how they can perform. And so I've been at the company for actually almost 8 years in the capacity of marketing. I've just moved up to Vice President of Marketing in the last 2.5 years. And we're really excited about the direction of the company. We've grown immensely in the last few years. We've made the Inc. 5000 list for the past 3 years in a row, so we're pretty excited about that, and have continued to grow our global presence as well. So my background prior to that was actually in the advertising and marketing agency arena. So it's been an interesting journey for me to kind of look at marketing, look at communication and outreach and branding from a variety of different perspectives, and to now be placed into the context of how do we help organizations work with their teams? How do we help them communicate their value and their mission and what they do via the way that their employees work is something that I've become really passionate about. And so I've really tried to look at that from the perspective of how I do my job better, how I communicate what our company does.
That actually sounds quite interesting to work in that field. So especially in marketing, because you've got to get down to the essence. Your message has got to be really pure on your value equation, if you will, and therefore you've got to really understand the deep principles of what you're trying to do with team building, with the coaching, with the leadership development. Would that be right?
That's a really good way of putting it, Tony. And what I've really found to be both a challenge and to be a real opportunity for us is this idea of it's selling an intangible product in many ways, the idea of human capital and building up people. And so for us, the challenge is always trying to understand what the best way to communicate the value of people to an organization's bottom line. And ultimately, that is the biggest differentiator that any company has. It's their culture. It's maximizing the way that their people can work together. And so that's really the approach that we take as we're communicating what we can bring to the table. The other big thing that has been interesting for me is that we really live our culture, and our assessments look at thinking and behavior from distinctive ways. And so we take that into our marketing. We take that into every communication that we put out there, because we understand that everyone's going to look at the world differently. Everyone's going to hear a message differently. So getting yourself out of your own cognitive framework and into the mind of your consumer or your client is something that is top of mind for us, and hopefully for every marketer, but especially in the way that we've really lived out the framework of Emergenetics that we speak about, work with every day. That pervades itself into the way that we communicate our value.
And that just makes a lot of sense. And of course, it's that old adage of eat your own dog food. So it definitely does make sense. So before we dive into that, Mark, let me step back. And we always like to start with a good win. And so let me ask you, if you look over the arc of your career, what are some of the wins, one or two of the good wins that you had as a leader, and what did it teach you about leadership?
I look back to a couple of key things that have helped shape the way that I approach my work and the way that I approach leadership. And I think it goes to first kind of a big awareness of the value and the impact that you can make from just a simple idea. And I'm definitely an ideas person. I love connecting dots. I love thinking through how one thing can manifest itself in another. And that was really apparent to me from one of the first assignments that I had at Osiris Group, which is the advertising and marketing agency that I worked for early in my career. And in typical ad agency fashion, we were burning the midnight oil, trying to come up with a new brand tagline for a company. And it was an investment company that was doing socially responsible investments for healthcare. And it just hit me all of a sudden. And I said, well, what about Wellspring for this idea? And everyone, on my team, I was really new, I was really young. And my boss, who was just one of the smartest people that I've ever met, that I still consider a mentor, she said, oh, that's great. I love that. And it certainly made me kind of feel, really warm and good inside. But it was what she said next that has really stuck with me, which is said, okay, now how are we going to get people to believe this and to really live it? And that was the hard work that followed. The idea was just the first step. But what I took away from that, and what I think has really impacted the way that I lead, the way that I look at my work from that early example, is that you can lead with an idea, but it's got to resonate with your team. It's got to resonate with your clients. It's got to resonate with the end user, so that people can really live that and really understand what any mission or what any idea means to them on a deeper level. And so that's what I try and communicate to my team at Emergenetics International, and that's what we talk a lot with our clients about, which is being really clear on what the mission and vision is that you're looking to convey and that you're looking to build, and just hammering that home time and time again. So that was one early example. From my work at Emergenetics International, I've really come into the idea that authentic leadership is so critical, and having the self-awareness to know who you are and where your strengths are, where your potential challenge points are, and making yourself vulnerable in a way that people understand that you don't have all the answers, but that you're coming at things with a perspective of what you know to be true about yourself and the way that you work, as well as an understanding that everyone works differently, and that you have that adaptability as a leader to take new ideas, new thoughts, new directions and perspectives from everyone on the team. So I think that those two kind of core elements of what my work has helped shape, the way that I lead.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense. I can't find the quote in my head. It's in there somewhere. But Thomas Edison basically said, ideas are a dime a dozen. He actually didn't say that. He said something quite like that. But it's the execution of the ideas. And effectively, that's the notes I've been taking with your first with your first lesson from your mentor. How do we get to believe the idea, and then how do we get the team and the client to live the idea? Because an idea is all well and good, but for me, it's not even the execution of the idea. It's the sustainability of the idea and the sustainability of the work once you've executed. Because I find, like with training, and you must find this in the area that you're in with management consulting, a lot of times companies will get excited about an idea. They will take the training on the idea. But if you go back and do a 360, 90 days or 180 days later, you find that it's had little measurable impact on the company because they didn't think about sustainability. Is that a challenge that you've struggled with in your career?
I think that is one of the big things that we hear a lot in our industry. That's exactly right, Tony, is that how do you take training from the classroom or in a virtual environment, as you said, which is growing more and more? How do you take that into daily application? Because a lot of the things that people get from a training context are these sorts of visceral experiences, visceral understandings of, who they are, how they look at their work differently. But then to take that and ensure that you have the mechanism in place to put that into a day-to-day context, that's a huge challenge for organizations. And that's one of the biggest struggles that I think that we come up against is people and organizations really love the work that we do and the work that a lot of companies do in our arena, but then they get back into a grind. And so what we've tried to do and what I try and do as a leader is constantly look to revisit the execution, and while reinforcing the idea that it's part of a bigger mission. It's part of what you do that really makes a difference. And that's what's great to work for a company like Emergenetics International, is that we really feel that we're providing people and empowering people with the knowledge to make their lives better, whether that's at work, whether that's at home, in their family, in their community. And that, I think, is that foundational piece that really drives every person that works for me, that works for our company. And then, that helps us be able to actualize that from a marketing communication standpoint in every email that we send out, in every, blog post that we write. It's about helping people put that into a context that's understandable and that's easy. And that's where I think you start to see impact and results.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense, because effectively what you've done is painted a picture of how you take that training and so forth and put it into your processes. Because I always say the thing about it is training is episodic, but transformation, i.e. education, is a process. And somehow you have to put the episodic training into the transformation process. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with you have to revisit it. You have to check, is it being executed? Is it being inculcated into our culture or into our execution processes or whatever? That does make a lot of sense, yes. So stepping back, you gave us a couple of good wins there. As a leader, have you had any challenges in your career that also helped shape you as a leader?
Of course. I think that if you can't reflect back on challenges and learn from them, then you're not really advancing in the way that is most beneficial. And, one of the key challenges that I've faced as a leader is in terms of growth and in terms of really stepping out of your assigned role in your head and really learning how to empower others to create the kind of end result that you need. And the example that I really see is, as our company has continued to grow, we've come on and brought on new people. We've expanded strategically the kinds of things that we wanted to do from a marketing and branding perspective. We've continued to grow globally. And with that, I've had some incredible opportunities to move up, to develop my leadership capabilities. But the challenges that I've, one of the biggest challenges that I've faced as I've continued to grow in this role is to step out of the weeds and I don't love the word delegate because I think it promotes the wrong kind of message. I really think about it as how to empower people who are working with you, because you've got brilliant people, and really if you've done it right, you've got brilliant people that think differently than you, that come up with a different perspective, that have a different way of communicating and expressing ideas and driving them forward. And stepping away from your own experience perspective or your own expertise perspective and saying, come to me with what you think we can do with this, and you know, using your platform as a leader to set the direction. That's where I think you can turn a challenge, which, you know, definitely is one that I saw in myself as our team continued to grow was, you know, I was slowing things down at times because I was getting too into the weeds with things that I had typically done or that, you know, I thought I needed to do when I had a boatload of talent right under my nose that was able to do things in a different way, in a better way in many cases. So, you know, that's been something that my CEO and I have talked a lot about, and, you know, we're continuing to kind of build up the capabilities of both myself as a leader and those within my team as individual leaders for their particular expertise and for their particular departments.
I love what you said there, because about building people up. I mean, that's obviously you said something earlier on. I'm going to pull a few things together. So you said people are your best differentiator in a company, and you were talking more about your messaging to your clients there. But it's just, I think that's a great insight, and therefore what you're saying is by not seeing delegation as delegation, but as empowerment, you use it as a tool to build up the people in your team and in your organization. I think that's a very, very powerful insight. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. It's made a huge difference. It's certainly not easy, and it's certainly not something that is a one and done kind of mindset or way of doing things. But it is something that if that's in your mind as a leader, I think it can make a huge difference.
And that goes again to something that you brought out to us, which is to put something not just as an episode, but to put it into the execution strategy. And that's it's not a one and done. And I think that's the whole thing about leaders, is leaders take a longer perspective, and they're not episodic, as you say. They do have this idea of checking and growth and long-term development. I think that's one of the core attributes that you see demonstrated in leaders. So as we look at some of your struggles, we look at some of your obvious wins there. You've mentioned an early mentor that you said you still see her as a mentor, and then you like implied or I inferred that your CEO is also mentoring you at the moment. So how do you develop as a leader? What kind of mentors have you had? How else do you see yourself on your corporate leadership development path? How have you developed in mentorship and so forth, and how do you see yourself developing?
Well, the ways that I think I've developed is particularly in the last several years. I think that the first mentor that I mentioned from our advertising agency, I think that the real things that I took away from her is just a way to be professional and a way to truly understand that everything you do has to be excellent. And that has stayed with me, and you know, I really take that to heart. What I've been able to do, and part of this is simply because I've worked at Emergenetics International for longer. I've seen the company grow with me, I think, you know, and I should say that in reverse. I've grown with the company, and it's been a really fun ride, because I think that the biggest things that have impacted me, particularly from a mentorship and a leadership perspective, is, you know, that our CEO and really our whole leadership team globally understands this idea that we're all coming at things from different perspectives, and that there is an adaptability and an adaptive form of leadership that isn't at the expense of authenticity. Everyone is who they are, but it's the awareness and understanding of adaptability that you can take and that, is really driven to, I think, all of our senior leaders in the company, that we really need to focus outside of our own cognitive boxes or, our own particular ways of doing things. And that's been really helpful for me as I think about how to take things into that day-to-day level and how to inspire and motivate my team. So I think that has made a big difference. I think that the other big thing that I really want to convey to others, and I want to continue to do myself, is this idea of curiosity. I'm a voracious reader from, all sorts of different kinds of publications, kinds of outlets. I listen to your podcast, Tony. I listen to countless podcasts when I go for a run every morning, and they help provide me new inspiration and new ideas. And that's something that I think I don't ever want to lose, because I think it's one of the biggest qualities of leadership that I can exhibit from a personal standpoint.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I remember, and it was either John Maxwell or Zig Ziglar said this, and they probably both said it in different ways, but leaders are feeders. Leaders are constantly feeding themselves and then feeding their team. And yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing is, the internet and the 21st century, you have access to so much knowledge and insight and wisdom. Why not? Simply, why not? There's just too much fun to be had in
right.
in learning
I totally
and being
agree.
curious. Yeah. So, Mark, we've actually reached the end of this episode. I just want to wrap up one of the things in fact, the title of this episode, I've actually already written it down. I really like it. You've come up with this idea of authenticity. You came up with this idea of adaptability near the end. So I'm going to call this episode Authentic and Adaptable Leadership, or Adaptive Leadership. I'll work it out. I'll work out the English in a minute. But seriously, I mean, you've given us a mini masterclass in those kind of concepts with the stories that you've given us, with the talk of your mentors. And I've got like a whole page of notes here. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate the opportunity to share in this way. It's really helpful for me as well. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Impact Team Nation, you've heard a lot today. You know what to do. Take down some notes. Find one or two nuggets that you inculcate into your professional development, into the process of education and transformation in the next 6 months. And the guarantee is that you'll be a better leader then than you are today. So until next week, this is Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio. Go well.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.